There is nothing worse than untapped potentials. If you know that you're made for more, this is the place. I know that every successful person I've ever met has one thing in common. They do not let themselves fall victim to their circumstances. They figure out a way to rise above it. So join me on this journey where I help you to be better, do better, and have better in life and in business. If you're feeling stuck and you're needing some practical tools, some hope to get you to that better life, this is definitely a place for you. Hey friends, welcome to the UNstuck podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Weemy, and today I have a return guest, somebody that I absolutely adore, Margot Zaher. You guys, she is such an amazing person. I love her, for so many reasons, beyond the fact that she's an empowerment coach and that she's an Enneagram coach. But I really, really wanted to bring her back because she has an expertise that I have not featured yet on the UNstuck podcast, which is really tuning into the Enneagram and basically the way that our personality is shaped and how that can give us clues on why we might be feeling stuck. And so I just thought, what a fun topic to be able to bring into this place. And I could not think of a better person to invite. So Margaret, thank you so much for being here.
I'm super excited to be back on your show. Very, very fun indeed.
You are so great. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you are going to be kind of sharing with us a little bit today?
Yes. So again, my name is Margot, and I'm a life empowerment and Enneagram coach, and I really specialize in helping individuals and mostly women really focus on figuring out what's stopping them and sabotaging them from moving forward in their lives and really creating the life of their dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the tools that I found so helpful over the last 20 years or so actually is the Enneagram. So that's what I wanted to explore today with you.
Yeah. And I love that. And, I think that's why we're friends, right? Because I have a similar passion of just why are we getting in God's way? What are we doing to put ourselves in the situations that we're not doing all the things that we want to do that's on our heart's desire? And I think that sometimes we don't want to sabotage our future. I think sometimes things are built into our subconscious, sometimes are just built into our personalities. And it's really just that awareness that allows us to be able to know what to do with that information and to be able to take a blind spot and make it into a conscious awareness so that we can have a plan to be able to overcome it, because we all have things, right, that hold us back or cause us to stumble.
Exactly. I love how you put that. I think the most important thing is bringing this into consciousness.
Yeah.
And to realize that the Enneagram for me was such a helpful tool in allowing me to understand how I was stopping myself without being really that aware of it even.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think we should start out by me at least defining what the Enneagram
I was just going to ask you that question. So that's how in tune we are. So why don't you go ahead and explain exactly what is the Enneagram if people have never even heard of it?
Yes. So Enneagram, Ennea stands for or means 9 in Greek. It actually comes from really thousands of years ago. Supposedly, some of the Greek philosophers were actually already using this term, the Enneagram, to explain how they saw nature and human beings showing up in 9 different ways. So that's why the word Ennea, 9, and then gram is really a diagram. So there's a visual really that's very helpful to use with the Enneagram to see how all of these 9 numbers relate to each other.
Yeah.
And so why it's so, I believe, important and exciting to figure out your Enneagram type is because it basically shows you strategies that you've used that you probably adopted sometime when you were a child to survive and hopefully thrive, which is you would like to thrive, but mostly survive in life to really get by. So there's basically one of 9 strategies we've discovered that you adopt. And basically these are the core motivations that drive you to behave certain ways and take certain action steps or not take action steps in your life.
So they're not necessarily what we're born with. I think that people that are really passionate about the human design, for example, are things that's ways we're born. But what you're saying is that this is really just an adaptation that we pick up as part of our personality due to some of the experiences that we've had, some of the programming that we've had as a way to survive.
Right. And obviously, I don't really know exactly. This is the best hypothesis some of us have out there. But what the idea behind it is that certain things happen in your childhood, perhaps between the ages of, like, let's say 3 and 7 or 9,
Mhm.
and those experiences lead you to adopt certain strategies.
Yeah.
So it's very fascinating in my work with the Enneagram that I have found that certain types in the Enneagram have very similar backgrounds.
Interesting. That's really interesting. And I think, again, like going back to just having an awareness of something is going to allow for us to use it as a tool to get us from where we are to where we want to be, which is the whole point of the Unstuck podcast, right? And what a lot of people don't realize is that when I do my Unstuck days, which is a very intense, assessment of people to help figure out why they're stuck and then giving them the roadmap that they need to get unstuck in like 30 days, I use the Enneagram as part of my tools, part of my assessment is really kind of giving it another piece of the puzzle so I can figure out what is it that motivates people and what is it that perhaps, shows up as a blind spot or a hurdle. And I would love for you to kind of share with us a little bit about the various nine, types and perhaps where people might get stuck when they are within one of those nine types. Does that sound good?
That sounds excellent. And we both are so aligned because I use the Enneagram as a tool also to help people get unstuck in my
I
program
know,
from
right?
stuck to
It's so great.
unstoppable. We're both
Yeah.
very aligned here.
Yeah.
So let's just start at the beginning of the Enneagram, which is type 1,
Yeah.
which often is called the perfectionist.
Okay.
And it's the one that's really focused on having to do things the right way and be perfect in the world. And obviously, probably what stops them the most and gets them the most stuck in their life is this idea of, I need to do it the right way. I need to show up in life a certain way where people see me as perfect, and I need to avoid making mistakes at all costs. So, of course, it's very challenging for these types to move forward in their lives because they keep thinking, oh, I need to have more information, or I need to perfect this before I finish this program and bring it out to the world. And so perfectionism is the key roadblock for them.
Okay. Very, very interesting. And I know that it's going to be hard for us to get through all of these nine, but
Right.
I'm just, curious if you have like one
Mhm.
like sentence that you could give somebody that's a one to move them forward.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing to remember as a one is to really learn to embrace the beauty of imperfection and how making mistakes is part of the process.
Mhm.
And not only that, it's something that is absolutely necessary to do anything in life. So to celebrate your mistakes
Okay.
and to celebrate the fact and know that you are going to make mistakes and to really embrace this whole thing about making mistakes will really move you forward as a
Yeah, yeah,
perfectionist.
it's kind of like that good, better, best, right? And that as long as you can get yourself into action, you can always improve it to be a better or a best version. But getting yourself into action initially is going to get you at least rolling and the momentum started.
Yes, and to have this attitude of, you know what, I'm gonna make mistakes and it's okay,
Yep.
versus being like, I'm so afraid of making a mistake.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that again, like, this is gonna be so hard for me to condense all of this because this
Right?
topic, like, we could spend a whole episode on just
I
one,
know.
right? But I'm just gonna say that I'm guessing that a lot of times the perfectionism is really showing up as, a protective mechanism of perhaps proving our worth or being worthy, which is why we have to show up as this perfect version of ourselves out of fear of being perhaps unloved, unworthy.
Right. And I would specifically, the words that I use for this type is that there is this feeling that they're somehow flawed and they have
Mm.
to correct that flaw. That there's some sort of
Overcompensate
innate
for that.
flaw people are
Yeah.
gonna see
Yeah,
and
yeah,
find out about.
that's really profound. And again, like you guys, we're gonna give you all kinds of resources from Margot at the end of this, so that if you're like, but wait, I want more, like we'll make sure that we give you guys all kinds of cool tools. So number two is what?
Is the caretaker on the Enneagram. So
Okay.
their focus is all about other people.
Yeah.
They want to take care, nurture them, really please them, and really show up for them 100%. And so, well, that's very beautiful. Unfortunately, they get stuck in people pleasing and really having trouble figuring out what they want to do. What is their need? You
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so a lot of times they wake up thinking, well, what about me? I didn't get any of my needs met. And
Right.
so a lot of them get stuck in that whole people pleasing syndrome.
Yeah, and that's really that's one that I see a lot in the people that I serve, and it's interesting because if you find that you're giving up all of your time and energy for everyone else as a way to serve people, oftentimes your own business gets neglected, and then you wonder why you're not as successful as you thought you'd be. And so I think that, in network marketing, for example, that shows up a lot where people are trying to pour into their teams but don't
Mm.
grow their own businesses. And so it's one of those things where we can sabotage ourselves by not taking care of us as part of the plan. And I think that's so wonderful. So that's kind of leads into it a little bit, but what would you say would be your kind of your one or two sentence, guide for twos so that they can move forward?
Well, one very important thing is setting good boundaries.
Mm,
Boundaries tend to be weak with the two. And so
yes,
it's really getting clear what's my boundary and learning to say no to other people and opportunities to say yes to yourself and what your commitments are to
yes,
yourself.
yes. And I'm guessing that if you guys are twos, you have this driving like need to serve people, but remembering that if you say yes to everyone, you're going to have to say no to some and the people who might really need you. And so I think that those boundaries and that saying yes to the right things so that you can say yes to all of the things that you want to do and how you really want to serve people is so important. So thank you for that. Like, that's so brilliant. Okay. A number three. What do number threes have?
They're called the achiever on the Enneagram. And they're all about moving forward. Naturally, this is a really interesting type when we talk about being stuck because they're going to be like, well, I don't get stuck because they're the ones that are very productive in the Enneagram and like, oh, I want to like move forward. I'm going to get stuff done. The thing that will hold them back, though, from true success is fear of failure. So what
Mhm.
will happen is they will go in certain areas and be super productive, but there may be these other areas where they could take things to a new level, but because they have a fear of failure, they don't venture out of that comfort zone
Yeah.
of where they're really productive and effective.
And it's interesting because when I take the test, like I don't get a three. I am surprised that I don't because I actually have seen, but I think it's because of patterns that I used to have. So I used to honestly get into this achievement cycle because I was trying to prove my own worth to myself. And so I'd get another degree, I'd get another certification, I'd get this job, right, to prove my worth. But I very rarely took risks because if I didn't succeed at that, then that took away from my worth. And so it was like this
Right.
constant need to achieve more in order to prove to myself that I was worthy or that I was important or that I wasn't flawed. And so I think that you're absolutely right in the sense that I definitely did not take risks, but I also think that sometimes I got buried in the busy in order to try to achieve whatever, and I really missed out on the here and now. And
Oh,
so,
yeah, there's so much we could say about that. And about you also not realizing that that's not necessarily your core. So this is a whole side note. But what's
yeah,
interesting about the Enneagram is that you can hang out at a place that really isn't your core. So imagine, like, for instance, me, I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, and I hung out in 3 also because you can slide to 3
mhm,
in an unhealthy way when I was younger by achieving and
okay,
trying to get rewarded
yeah,
and stuff.
okay,
So the Enneagram, basically there's what we call integration disintegration points and places that we may hang out when we're at different phases of our lives that are not
okay.
our core point. And so that's why you may have some different results sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, that's so fascinating. And what would you say to help people get unstuck that are in the threes?
So the threes, what's really important is for them to go back and connect with their heart. Now, obviously, a lot of types can benefit from this, but to really get more clear, like, what is their heart really saying versus getting into this busy, busy, I've got to succeed. Like, okay, what does my heart really want? Because they're actually disconnected a bit from their heart,
Mm,
the threes. And to be able to sort of start thinking, okay, what is it that I'm actually really excited about doing versus just staying in motion,
yeah.
and what am I afraid will happen if I actually do that? What's that failure underneath that, to try to go more deeply into that? So I think the first step there really though is slowing everything down to get more in touch with what's true to your heart.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's so brilliant. And I think that, yeah, definitely stuck in the head, and not really taking the time to think what I want to do. There's a difference between what I should do and what I can do, right?
Right.
So I can do a lot, but what should I do? And that's where the heart comes in. So I just
Right.
love that. And okay, so let's move on to number four.
So number 4 is the individualist. This is a fascinating place to be on the Enneagram because it's really about being unique and standing out in the world and showing your talents off to the world. However, one of the challenges is that you may not step out of your comfort zone or show people your amazing artistic expressions, because there's a lot of artistic creativity here, because you're afraid of rejection. You're afraid that other people are really not going to see your unique beauty. And so you're like, well, maybe I'll just stay hidden over here and I'm not going to show you my art or show you my, have you listen to the new music I just created. And so that's what happens to a lot of people in the individualist area of the Enneagram.
Okay. And I'm curious, when it comes to the Enneagram, is there a way that you can, take the thing that it's, kind of categorizes you as, and like really showcase that, like make it your best feature, like the achiever or the helper or the individualist. Like if you embrace it and you're like, all right, well, I'm just gonna go with this and I'm gonna use it to my like, I'm gonna be proud of this part of myself. Does that something that can happen if you
Oh,
can learn how to use it
yeah.
properly? Yeah.
Yes, Michelle. So this is one way of looking at this, is that actually every single type has some place where they're really, I would say, kind of learning and evolving in that area to really almost be the expert of the Enneagram. So
Okay.
I'll give you an example. Like for instance, to really understand, if you're like the two, what unconditional love really looks like, and that service, unconditional service, but in a way that supports not just you but everyone. So what I believe, and a lot of people believe, is that like and one of the most famous books on the Enneagram, called The Wisdom of the Enneagram, actually has 9 levels of health in each type, that you can evolve to high levels of functioning in your
Okay,
Enneagram
cool.
type,
Yeah.
where you're really, really embracing more the strengths of that number.
Yeah.
And so for the individualist, the strengths is really about embracing their unique artistic expressions and
Yeah.
in the way
Yeah.
they connect with that deep emotional realm in a healthy
In a
way.
healthy way. Yes. That's
So they all have healthy expressions, and they all have kind of sabotaging unhealthy expressions. And so it's about the evolution.
I love that. And so not only are you giving us like practical tools and like, hey, this makes sense why I'm feeling stuck, but you're also giving us hope that we can take
Oh,
this part of ourselves and be like, okay, I am ready to shine my individualist flag and I am ready to step into that space. And so I love that so much. Okay, a number 5, I believe we're on.
yes, it's called, so the investigator.
Okay.
So these people are really dive deep into the knowledge and get to be really deep experts on something.
Okay.
And so what's really happening for them is they actually hide behind their knowledge.
Okay.
It's kind of like a safety net for them, because they're honestly, there's fear that's running this type. But if
Yeah.
they have enough knowledge, enough competency, they feel good. So what happens for them, then way they get stuck, obviously, is that they don't venture into areas where they aren't knowledgeable. They must accumulate knowledge. And so they may spend a lifetime accumulating knowledge before they go out there and actually present it to others, or use that knowledge, or let others know about their knowledge. So they get stuck in accumulating knowledge
Yeah. But
without moving
oftentimes
forward.
don't get themselves into action.
Action's a real challenge for them.
Yeah.
Getting
Yeah.
themselves into action and getting themselves out there in the world. So they tend to be more hermit-like and
Mhm.
focused on like investigating things,
Yeah.
exploring things, discovering new things.
Yeah, and I have people that I've helped that have been in this area as well, and it's heartbreaking actually to see people that have this much to contribute to the world, keeping it to themselves because they're so afraid of putting it out there, and so they just
Mhm.
again like continue to consume, consume, consume. But who's being blessed by that
Right,
consumption if we're too
exactly.
afraid to put it out there? And so I just have a passion for really just like you helping people really use their gifts and getting out of our own way. And it's in just
Right.
the acknowledgement of this to say, oh my gosh, that's totally me. Like I keep having to add all of this knowledge, but I'm not really doing anything with it. What would you say would be a great thing for fives to think about that's going to perhaps move them forward?
So one of the things for the five to really, you know, kind of embrace and get clear on is, okay, I'm never going to have enough knowledge, in my opinion, yet. In general, am I in the upper 90% echelon in this area, to really get clear on like, okay, I am actually pretty competent, and be able to embrace the level of competency you're at, so that there can be some sense of like, yes, I can do this. I can go
Yeah,
out there and tell people that I
yeah,
am competent, and to look at your life and the interactions you've had, or maybe the work environment, to see your competency and to be able to acknowledge, yes, I am competent. And it's kind of like a lot of times we don't realize how competent we are. We keep striving for more competence
Yes,
in that
yes.
area.
And I think too, one of the things that I have found is that the more knowledge that I have, the harder it is for me to
Right.
utilize because I almost am overwhelmed by my own like library inside of my head. And so I think that it actually makes it worse sometimes to utilize it when I add more to the mix. And so I think recognizing that we're put on this earth to help others, but oftentimes it's not the people 100 steps behind us. It's the one who is behind us a step or two. And so, as long
Mhm.
as we remember that we just have to know one or two steps ahead of the people we're
I love
trying to
that.
help, that's actually more beneficial for everyone involved than trying to know everything and then teach everything to everyone because that's not really as useful.
Right. Actually, I love that, Lachelle. I mean, just because I think a lot of us fall into that trap.
Yeah.
Even people who don't have a lot of five in them, like, I need to know more than I know. And then we never know enough, obviously, because there's
No.
too much to know. It's
Yes.
crazy
Yeah. And that
making.
paralyzes us. All right. So, okay. So, number six.
Okay, so called the loyalist, or the devil's advocate. So, this is a really complex type because they have, they have more dimensions than some. But what I
Okay.
mean by that is that technically they have what's called a counterphobic and a phobic type. And so
Okay.
they show up differently. Well, one of the things to remember about the six and what's really driving this six is wanting to feel safe and secure in the world,
Okay.
and specifically wanting to make sure that others also feel safe and secure, and that they support, basically their keyword is to support other people in moving forward in the world in a
Yeah.
safe and secure
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So what obviously holds them back here, though, is that they are afraid of taking risks and getting out of their comfort zones, and there's a lot of self-doubt because the six has a mind that goes back and forth, and it goes into, yes, we should, no, we shouldn't, what if this happened? So there's a lot of like thinking about maybe like worst case scenarios that can occur in the six, because it's a mind type and the mind can get out of control. And so there's a lot of self-doubt and procrastination that happens in the six. And so not moving forward because of fear of making, doing something the wrong way, and maybe
Yeah.
this isn't going to work out, so they don't do it at all. And
Yeah.
so this is a traditional place where a lot of people find themselves, procrastination, because I think actually we have quite a few people who go to the six or fall into the six in our world.
Yeah. And if I recall from a couple minutes ago, you said that you're a six.
Yes.
So, what have you found has been the most helpful to move you forward into action?
Well, one of my favorite slogans, which I borrowed from a very famous company called Nike, is just do it. I really think I've been stuck a lot in my mind about like, oh, is this a good idea? Is that a good idea? A lot of like there's a spinning, kind of a chaos that actually
Yeah.
happens in the six's
Yeah.
mind. So I have done a lot in my life of just do it. If you're
Yeah.
inspired by it, if my heart feels good, just take some action, move
Yeah.
forward, and figure out the next step later on. You don't have to figure the whole thing out right now. You can
Right.
just keep moving forward. So it's getting into action for the six is super important, and learning also to rely on their own sense of what's right for them. Again, getting into that heart
Right.
place of
Right.
what does my heart really want versus listening to a lot of other people,
Yeah.
because that's also what a six can do, is start deferring to others, thinking, oh well, maybe they have the answer, maybe this person has the answer, and so they get really lost in a whole bunch of like chaotic ideas
Right.
of things
Right.
to do next.
Yeah, and it paralyzes you into more indecision because now there's more opinions to consider, and really it's just getting yourself out of your head and into your heart again, and then just doing it.
Yes, basically. And being willing to face some of these core fears. I work a lot with people on facing fear, and specifically the six. They are part of them. The phobic fears are phobic types are very aware of their fear and need to learn how to face fear and embrace fear and know it's part of that. The counterphobics have actually decided that fear doesn't exist and they're going to go for it anyway. So they are a very different type.
Okay, okay, and I love that because I think oftentimes we know the most about like who we are because
Right.
it's interesting when we're the two of us, like we just want to understand so that we
Right.
can perform at our best. And so it's so cool that for people who are listening, they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like, go to Margot and be like, okay, I want to know more about this. Okay, so number 7, what would you say about the 7s?
So the 7 is the enthusiast. They are all about learning and doing new things and experiencing life to its fullest, which sounds like a lovely, juicy place to be, which it is. It has those some drawbacks, which is what's really driving them is the fear of experiencing pain, actually, or of suffering of any kind. They want to stay in this little happy zone over here,
Yeah,
and so they're going to do what brings them joy, makes them happy, which I'm all for. Yet there can be some challenges because what that does is it can create this kind of surfacey energy where you're jumping to the next thing immediately before you
yeah.
finish anything.
Mhm.
So where they get stuck is actually finishing projects. They can start a ton, don't finish them or bring them out to, at real life and get them done so other people can benefit from the
Yeah,
projects that you've been doing.
yeah, and, I'm a 7.
I have a 7 wing, so I understand a
So,
lot
like
too.
so I can completely relate to that, and I think that sometimes one of the things that I've had to recognize and embrace is that instead of, you talked about leaning into your heart more and in your head less, but I think one of our issues is that we lead with our heart more sometimes. As like, "Oh, this feels good," and we're just gonna do it, and I get into action, and then I'm like, "Oh, but that feels good too," and then boom, I do that. And so I think that while it's really great to lead with my heart, I also have to recognize, right, that like sometimes you just have to do the things that aren't as much fun and and to put ourselves through that so that we can see it through. So yeah, I love that. So
Yeah. So, I love sevens because I have a lot of seven. There's wings in the Enneagram for those who may not know a lot about the Enneagram, but you have a core place and then you have a wing where you tend to use a lot of that energy too. So my wing is the 7. One of the things that's really helpful for 7 is that their integration point is the 5. And so really to go more inward because the 7's so outward, their energy to go more inward and be also like learning to meditate, to slow down the energy and get like, okay, I'm just going to be fully present to right now because they tend to be a lot in the future. They
yes,
can get fully present to right now and be able to be okay with quote unquote the feeling of boredom, the feeling of things having to be really like,
yeah,
slowing down is hard for a 7. That's
yes,
where they get
yes,
stuck.
100%. And I think that like I think one of our gifts is that we are doers. So I don't overthink it. I just do it and then I figure
Mhm.
it out. But I also think that as I've been learning more about myself, I'm learning that if I want to do something, I'm giving myself like a day to think about it, to meditate on it, to pray on it, to feel it, and then make sure that that feeling is consistent, not just, oh, this feels good right now. I'm going to give myself enough courage, the 30 seconds to just do it, and then I do that again later that day. And so I think that's just like you said, is taking that moment to say, okay, like let's center, let's make sure that this is really what you want to do and slow my roll a little bit. And that's actually been something that's been really helpful. So all right, moving on to number 8, what would you say
Yes.
about 8s?
So the 8 is the challenger or boss on the Enneagram. This is a place of really naturally being a leader and taking charge of what's going on. They always sort of know what's going should be happening next. They have strategies and they are very magnetic. They tend to attract people to them and that follow them
Yeah, yeah.
because they have so much level of confidence and really
Mhm.
want to, be in charge. So
Yep.
while technically they may not look very stuck because they're like moving things forward, one of the big challenges for them, though, I think, in actually stepping into their full magnificence is learning the art of collaboration and how important it is to have other people's point of view and their expertise and will make them much more successful than just being like, one man show. It's my way or the highway. And people who people disagree with me, you're bye bye, that kind of
Yeah.
energy. So that more collaboration for a type 8 is very helpful for them.
Yeah, and I think, as an 8, also one of the things that I notice is that it's really hard to understand why other people just don't do. And why are you stuck? Like, why are you, like, I don't understand why, you're still back there. And why are you overthinking this? And so I think that it can be really hard to be able to empathize with some of the people who don't think the same way. And that can be really frustrating. and therefore sabotage, just like your mood and your success and stuff, because you're just like, I don't get it. And, unable to really work with other people and their perspectives.
Yes, I mean, so an 8 tends to be very focused on outcome, and let's
Yeah,
just get this thing done, and they could railroad people, which is one of their big challenges, without even really knowing they're railroading people. And so a lot about their opportunity for growth to kind of unstuck out of their comfort, out of their normal way of operating, is to realize the benefit of other people in their lives, and even to get like, okay, let me get more curious about my relationships, and like, how can other people benefit me? To start asking yourself that question, if you're an 8, would be a really good thing, because you could really enrich your life by having other people's input and
absolutely.
connection.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, number 9 on the list, the final
We're
number 9.
doing good here.
I
So
know, I know.
the number 9 is the peacemaker. So they're all about keeping the peace at any cost, and so they want to avoid conflict. And they are so into keeping the peace that actually they have sometimes little sense of themselves. They'll just be like, "Oh, if you want to do that, that's great. Let's do it." It makes them good negotiators. Yet on the other hand, it makes it really hard for them to really embrace and own a project and take it out into the world, or step, more fully into their magnificence, as I say, because
Right.
they aren't really quite sure who they are, because they're so used to merging with other people to keep the peace. So
Right.
basically what stops them the most is afraid of confrontation, afraid of rocking the boat, afraid of disturbing the peace.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have some very, very, like, very important people in my life that are nines, and yeah, you definitely can see that they just are so kind, and they want to just help everybody out, but it's very hard for them to kind of take a stand, or to stick up for themselves, or to set boundaries and some of that stuff. And so, I think that it's so great to see people in their uniqueness, but I also, like, would love to see just some more, acknowledgement of how amazing they are, instead of just how they can kind of work
Mhm.
and do and serve and be, what everybody else needs them to be.
Right. I mean, where the real opportunity for them is, like you said, is to get clear on, these are my gifts. These are the ways I can contribute to the world,
Yeah.
and figure out a plan to get out there, energetically speaking and
Yeah.
physically speaking. One of the problems that nines encounter a lot actually is sort of staying in the background and
Yes.
disappearing a little bit into it,
Mhm. Yeah.
and not putting themselves forward and saying, I have something
Yeah.
to contribute here also.
Yeah. And what I think is so cool, so I, utilize several tools and assessments and stuff during, my Unstuck process. And one of them is the DISC assessment as well. And
Oh,
and so it's really kind of cool when you are familiar with these different modalities, like a 9 and an S are like, the same. A 7 and an I, that makes sense. An 8 and a D makes sense. And so it's really cool when you can utilize different things and you start to see themes, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, all of these things are starting to come together. These are showing me, like, their roadmaps to where my strengths are, where I might have some blind spots, where I might be, getting stuck, and where my obstacles are. And it's really cool when you can start to learn more about yourself, that all of a sudden these tools and this awareness gives you the pieces of the puzzle that you need to move forward.
exactly. Well, we have so much in common. I've spent a lot of years also with the DISC assessment. So that is definitely part of my background as well. I think, like you said, the most important thing is awareness. And when things are running in the background, we have little control over doing anything differently. And
Mhm.
so getting clear on, why we're getting stuck, how we're sabotaging ourselves. And I think, for everyone listening here, to just to get a sense, if there's one or more of these that may stand out to you,
Yeah.
think, okay, well, that's an area for me to focus on, and not making it wrong that you have these areas. Everybody has some area where they get stuck,
Mhm.
but getting more curious about it, and putting more focus on that one area,
Yeah.
instead of just kind of settling for the status quo, I guess.
Right. And I think that what you said was so profound, is that you're getting curious around it. So what you didn't say was I'm going to get shameful around it.
Right.
Like I'm going to put myself down because of it. Like what's wrong with me for doing this, right? You're just getting curious about it. And the other thing that I love that you said was that sometimes we can, in our defensiveness, say, well, this is the way I am. So they can just
Mhm.
deal with me, right? Which is maybe, partly true in some ways. But if we want to truly step into the highest, most magnificent, in your words, version of ourselves, it's really just embracing our strengths and embracing all parts of ourselves and letting it become, the bright, shiny part of us, right?
Right.
Instead of just being stuck into, well, this is the way that I am and they can just deal with it. Like that's a totally different energy, isn't it?
Totally. Well, it's almost one of the ways that some people have used the Enneagram that kind of touches on this a little, unfortunately, is kind of a little bit as an excuse. Well, I can't do anything about this because I'm a type 6 or a type 7. I'm lost forever in this in this versus realizing it's really a tool for growth,
Oh my
you know.
gosh, totally. I mean, one of the things as a 7 that I know about myself is that, bright shiny and I get into action. So one of the things that I can do is I can have like a bazillion projects going all at once, right? And so then I can tell myself, well, I'm a 7 and I'm a doer and I'm a dreamer. So, but I'm just not very organized, right? When it's hilarious, Margot, because people will tell me all the time, like, you're so organized. And I just kind of giggle to myself because
Mhm.
I've had to become organized to maintain the hot mess express that my life could be if I let that train go on its own. And so I think that like when you can notice the parts of yourself that are maybe going to be your weak parts because of the things that are easiest to you, and then making it intentional to say, okay, like I know that it's very possible that I could be a very disorganized person. What can I do? What can I learn? Who can I add to my life that can help me to kind of rein in some of this stuff so I don't, let this completely go unchecked and my train go off the tracks.
I love what you just brought up there in that example because you also point to something that's very important in using the Enneagram for evolution. I think is really knowing what your integration point is and what your disintegration point. And for you as a type 7, the integration point is type 1. So it is about bringing the structure in the organization that type 1 naturally has, and so you're accessing those higher level functioning of type 1. And so that's something that I work with my clients on is really understanding the place of integration on the Enneagram for them and how to access that juicy energy that really they can access for expressing their full potential in the world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Okay. So I think that we could literally make like 9 episodes out of this, but we
We
wanted to.
could one for each time.
I know,
All
but
we're going to do is
we
talk
had to
about the
give people,
Enneagram.
yeah, we had to give people a little, like teaser, I guess, in this whole cool way that we can learn more about ourselves and really maximize our own potential. So tell us a little bit about, like how you particularly use this tool and how people could, start to utilize some of your tools to get them, to where they want to be.
So the first thing that I do with people is that I do Enneagram typing, where you
Okay.
actually spend 90 minutes with me going deep and doing an Enneagram typing session with me. I have a very specific protocol that helps you really uncover what's going on with you. That's much more in depth than doing something online, and it provides,
Mhm.
I would say, higher quality results because
Yes.
you also understand how the Enneagram works, how you fit into the Enneagram, and also, then I follow that up with Enneagram analysis, which will basically show you how to use the Enneagram, the integration point, disintegration points in your life. And specifically, then I focus on really looking at the core underlying belief system, negative belief, and fear that's really kind of fueling some of the negative aspects of your Enneagram number. And I do some process type work as a coach that helps really shift some of these underlying beliefs that keep you in what I call a polarized place with your Enneagram type. So basically, the idea is that if you're super polarized, meaning let's talk about the perfections, if you're like, oh, I must do everything perfectly, I can't ever make a mistake, that's a really polarized place to be on the
Right.
spectrum.
An all or nothing and a black or
All of
white.
that.
Like, yes.
Black or white to really
Yes.
collapse that and
Mhm.
help the perfections move into that gray zone. Like it's okay to
Yes.
make mistakes. So
Yes.
that's what I do as a coach basically is to help collapse some of those belief systems
Yeah.
and those unhealthy patterns that come from some of these kind of core core conditioning,
Right.
seed experiences we had probably when we were much younger.
Absolutely. And like we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, that many of those belief systems are basically programmed into our subconscious before we're 7 years old. So they're really not within your control, but they're running the background programming and the decisions that you make and basically steering your personality traits and some of the stuff. So if you can get to the core of kind of how those programs were placed there to begin with and how they can maybe be be adjusted to serve you better in this present day, like what an amazing gift that you give people, Margot. And I think that I'm so grateful that you were able to come on today and share your techniques and share your passion for this. And we'll make sure, you guys, that you have access to everything that you need inside the show notes. And I believe that, Margot, you have a gift for people who are listening to this podcast.
Yes, I really want to support all of you. If you're excited about getting your Enneagram typing done and working on some Enneagram coaching with me, I'm offering a $50 discount. So if you mention Lachelle's podcast to me and say, "Hey, I heard about you from Miss Lachelle," then I'll definitely give you a $50 gift,
Awesome.
and we can, start doing some exciting work together on discovering who you are in the Enneagram and how that may benefit you moving forward in your life.
I love that. Thank you so much for your generosity. You guys, if you haven't already, make sure that you hit subscribe so that we can be in your inbox and in your podcast every single week. If you haven't already, leave a review. Let Margot know how much you loved this episode and what you loved about it. That's always so much fun. Share it out in your stories and tag us, and make sure that you're sharing this with anybody who needs to hear it, who is really going to be able to use this to get from where they are to where they want to be. It's always so much fun to hear from you guys. And lastly, Margot, as you know, because you've already been on the show, what question would you love the audience to think about that is going to move them from where they are to where they want to be?
Well, I think based on today's, podcast,
Yeah.
which Enneagram type do you think you are and how might it be stopping you?
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I love it. And, I just want to just say real quick that like there are, several Enneagrams or several disc assessments. I use a disc that is so involved that people get a 65-page like printout
Wow.
that we go through. Like, you guys, there is a difference in the caliber between what you can get online and what you can get from a professional who could take you through this process. So, but if it's going to get you started, just explore, figure it out. And then if you're wanting to know a little bit more too, if that's, going to hold you back, like just do it. But get Margot, give her a call, give her an email, and go on this journey with her. So, all right, you guys, I'm so glad you're here, and I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. And I'll see you all next week. Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
so much. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the UNstuck podcast. I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you. And don't forget to check out the show notes if you want to get into my private club, the Better Club, to be able to learn better ways to be better, do better, and have better. So until next time, keep showing up. Let's get unstuck together. Have a great day.